In your physical business, you may have things like negative ley lines that are running underneath your physical space. You may have a need to put protections on your business space. You may have stuck energies if you've had a lot of drama and angst in your business, if there's been employees that are problems with each other or family members that are working in the business, which is more often the case with that sort of challenge. You need to clear that space. You need to clear that out and set up new energetics for it.
Welcome to Streams to Impact, and be inspired to engage passionately in the work of your calling while achieving financial prosperity through multiple streams of high-yield returns on investment to bring your dream of making a meaningful impact to reality. I'm your host, Dr. Allen, and I am delighted that you are joining us today. If you haven't yet, get a complimentary copy of our exclusive guide, High Yield Investment Blueprint. Secure 18% plus returns in 60 days. Go to our website, highyieldblueprint.com. That is www.highyieldblueprint.com. Just provide your email address and we'll send you a copy today. Hello, enlightened investors, and welcome back to Streams to Impact. We are delighted that you are with us today, and I know that you are going to enjoy today's show. We have a very special guest with us. Kelle Sparta is a transformational shaman, spiritual coach, and business mentor, blending personal growth and business insights to help spiritual entrepreneurs thrive. And she empowers leaders to align purpose with profit for success, which is what Streams to Impact is all about. Incidentally, Kelle, from 2004 to 2018, was a national residential real estate industry trainer and also served as a commercial real estate agent, working extensively with investors. And investors are who are on our show, so we are glad to have Kelle with us. So Kelle, glad you are with us because your journey, much like Equus, which is our spiritual animal for Streams to Impact and our business, Steed Talker Capital, has your life, like Equus, has been one of transcending boundaries and inspiring others to also do the same. So can you share with us the moment or the inspiration, the experience that led you to this path of becoming a spiritual coach?
Well, so that's a really tough one. You warned me about this question coming in, and I have been chewing on it all morning because the challenge for me in identifying that one point is that my mother raised me in this. So from the time she said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. And, she started training me in personal growth and spiritual works and things like that from the time I was 5 years old. And so it's not so much what I do as who I am. Because, I have high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials. So it's sort of been just my whole thing. And, I've evolved into it. I did a lot of business coaching over the years. And, I found myself doing a lot of spiritual coaching along with the business coaching. And I'm like, you know what, this is really my gift, is combining these two worlds, because it's been my two passions in life, is the spiritual personal growth angle and then the business. I started studying business when I was like 17. And I've been I read all of the autobiographies and the biographies of the millionaires and just ate all that stuff up, and then found Napoleon Hill and, Bob Proctor and, Tony Robbins and all the people, right? I can't even name everybody I've studied. It's 50 years. I'm 55, so it's been 50 years of study. And, I'm an information sponge, and I'm an engineer brain with an intuitive gift. And so you put the two together, and what I'm really good at is cross-pollinating multiple different spiritual paths and being able to say, yeah, this thing over here means this thing over here, and this is how they overlap, and here's how you create a bigger world view. It was very funny because when I first started my podcast, Spirit Sherpa, in 2018, all of my friends were coming up to me after about 6 months and saying, "Oh my God, I love your podcast." And I'm like, "It is a beginner's podcast. Why are you even listening to it? I know you're not at that." And they're like, no, you're taking every 2-hour class I've ever been to and stitching it together into a big worldview. And I was stunned because I wasn't aware I was doing it, but it is how it works in my head. And so I stopped calling it a beginner podcast after that. But yeah, this is just where I am, right?
Well, what a blessing to have a mother who, from birth, essentially saw your authenticity and supported you in your authenticity. I had wonderful parents, but they didn't necessarily have that particular gift. As a counselor, I have heard all kinds of terrible parenting stories. I had good parents, comparatively speaking, but they themselves, I don't know that they ever really found their own authenticity, and you can't help someone else down that journey until you find your own. And so, what a blessing you had that from the crib onward. Tell us about the spiritual CEO and what that is, and what that is to be energetically aligned with yourself and with your business.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pieces and parts that go into that. If you think about all the pieces and parts that go into your business itself, the marketing, the sales, the customer service relationship, all your vendor relationships, your employees, your contractors, all of it, right? Every single one of those things brings a piece to the equation. Even your brand has an energetic, right? And so, and you put it on the internet, and now you've got to look at the energetic of the internet itself, because everything impacts it. So, as the CEO, as the leader of the company, what you are looking at is you have to consider both the energetics of the business itself and your energetics. And this is especially true if you're running a smaller organization, because you don't have as many people's energy to sort of dissipate your own. And the more you are death gripping the control of the organization as opposed to, delegating, the more your personal energy field impacts your business. And, for women in particular, there's an interesting dynamic that happens right around the $1 to $2 million mark. Just depends on the type of industry. So it might be a little earlier, a little later, depending on the industry type. But somewhere around that place, women have a tendency. So men will build the business outside of themselves. That energetically, there's a separate energetic container that men inherently create. Women tend to gestate their business like a baby. So they build the business inside their energy field. These are all unconscious things, but that's just how we tend to do it. And so because of that, at some point, you have to birth that business out of your energy field if you want it to grow past that point. And so you'll know when you're there, because you're going to start to get really uncomfortable and your business is going to stall out and you're going to be going, I don't know what's going on, but I'm everything's a lot, right? And that's the point at which women need to birth the business out of their energy field so that the business can become separate and grow past that point. So these are all things, but even if you're building the business outside of yourself to begin with, it's going to be built from your energy because you are the one who is building it. And unless you are a skilled practitioner in energetics, there's no way to do that without putting your energy into it. And so things like abundance limitations, right? So if you've got a set point in your income that you are like, I can't go past this either because, my father never made more money than this, or my mother never made more money. It's not okay to be rich because, people in my family don't like rich people, or, whatever. If you've got some of that in your field, and you can get to really high dollar amounts and still hit that, right? Because there's, in your head, there's a number that says this is rich, right? And so, if you've got any of that, if you have resistances to receiving, which people who came out of traumatic childhoods, where the, receiving love was not a good thing because it came with an obligation, right? If you've got a resistance to receiving, that's going to be a problem for your business. If you have, not good enough and imposter syndrome. That's going to be a problem for your business. These are all things that will play into the bigger picture. And then on top of that, there are potential ancestral line patterns. So if you have an ancestral lineage of people doing really well in business and then it crashing and burning and then really well and crashing, then you're going to have that pattern coming through to you, and you need to unwind that so that you don't end up with the same pattern. If you've got past life issues. So for instance, I had a client who was hitting a certain point. He did so much better than his previous month. And he's like, wow, this is amazing. And then he couldn't work. Not that he wasn't capable. It's just that he couldn't get himself to. He was sabotaging at every point. And he was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And I went and looked, and it was a past life issue where he had been a merchant that had done fairly well for himself and his family. And then the king noticed him and brought him up into the court and raised him up, and he did phenomenally well and everything was amazing. And then the king being capricious, got upset at him one day and cast him out, and he and his family were penniless, and he never recovered. And so every time he got up to a level where he felt like he was going to be beyond his wildest dreams, he shut down because he didn't want that outcome. It was an unconscious pattern from his past life. So once we made it conscious, he could say, this is not that life. There is no king. I'm okay. And he moved past it. So that's a sort of example of a past life issue. You can also have haunting spirits or entities that are like past life stuff or this life stuff that have attached onto you and are trying to, if you go into a pattern of negative thinking, sometimes you'll bring in negative entities that will support that pattern of negative thinking because they feed off of the negativity. And so the more negative you feel, the more food they have, right? They're not really evil spirits. They're just, this is what they eat. And so, they're like, give me more. So, and then there's physical things too, right? So in your physical business, you may have things like negative ley lines that are running underneath your physical space. You may have a need to put protections on your business space, right? You may have stuck energies if you've had a lot of drama and angst in your business, if there's been employees that are problems with each other or family members that are working in the business, which is more often the case with that sort of challenge. You need to clear that space. You need to clear that out and set up new energetics for it. There could be bad feng shui. There could be underground water that is coming in and pulling energy out of your business from underneath the ground. There could be energy grid deformities that are causing your business to not feel solid when somebody checks in, because everybody makes, and we talk about this in sales, right? Everybody makes a emotional decision rationalized by logic, is what they say in sales. I'm going to put it this way. Everybody makes an energetic decision rationalized by logic. They'll call it emotional, but in actuality, your energy field is feeling into the energy field of the person that you're looking to hire. And if it's not a fit, if it doesn't harmonize, then they're not going to hire you. And I don't care how good you are as a salesperson, it's going to be a tough road, right? So, and then there's always the random astrological movement and solar flares that come into play. We can't do anything about them, but we can understand that they're in play. Like Mercury retrograde is a good example. I honestly, when I first heard about Mercury retrograde 20 some years ago, I thought it was utter garbage. I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I started watching the patterns of my life. And I was like, every time communications broke down, every time technology broke down, I went and looked to see if Mercury was retrograde. And every time it was. So Mercury retrograde is one that I really track and keep track of because it is very influential in my experience in my business. And so, all of these factors come into play. And, is it a lot? Yeah. Is it too much? It's too much for most people to track. And so, one of the things that I really recommend is that you do work on an ongoing basis so that you do a little bit at a time. Because if you try to deal with all of this at once, you're going to just like explode your brain. Yeah. And, it's hard to learn how to do this on your own unless you've been doing this for a long time. So, all of these things, like I don't even do astrology. I don't. It's more math than I want to do. And I've been doing this stuff for 50 years. And there's just every time I turn around, somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, have you heard of X?" And I'm like, "No, what's that?" 50 years and I'm still getting new stuff. And it's like, because people channel new stuff all the time. Yeah. And so, you got to pick and choose what's relevant to you. So I realize I just babbled on for a long time, but.
Well, it's very, very interesting and helpful to give us a basis and an understanding for where it is that your work comes from here. But you have outlined some 34 common energy blocks that we face in business. That's a lot to look at, as you just said. So what are the most prevalent energy blocks that are most common and are most typical, and that where we should start when we're looking at this from an energetic perspective?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say, I just want to contextualize the blocks, because I've done over 3,000 energy reviews on people on a spiritual path, and everybody has some of these. Nobody has all of them. Okay, so let's start with that. And they're based on where you are in your energetic process, right? So everybody's working on a specific energy level that they're in. If you've just come into the level, you'll have a lot of blocks. If you're about to clear the level, you'll have very few. And so, but the blocks are almost always related to a theme, right? And so the theme might be, not taking good care of yourself, no self-love, right? And that would include like 6 or 7 different blocks in your system would play into that theme. Okay. And in business, if you're lacking self-love, then you're going to overwork, you're going to overpromise, you're going to overdeliver, you're going to undercharge. You're going to fall down when people get upset. You'll roll over for anything that somebody's upset about. All of these things are going into a lack of self-love, for instance. And so, the things that I find that are the most common are imposter syndrome. Which goes into a not good enough sort of thing. Sometimes it's a too big, too much. I'm like, oh, I can't be too big or too much. Which comes from a childhood of being told to not be seen or heard, right? Inner child issues often comes into play, because if you've ever found yourself in a position where you're sitting there and you're saying, you're just completely overwhelmed and you're stuck and you're lacking clarity and you don't know what to do next, and you're going to do something but you don't know if it's the right thing and you're just exhausted, that's when your inner child is driving the bus, right? Your inner child is in the driver's seat and they can't reach the pedals and they can't see over the dash, and it's no big surprise that they're overwhelmed, right? And so the key is to learn how to take them out of the driver's seat and go back in as the adult and do that. And so that's a big one. There's a lot of identity issue things that go into it. So especially if you have fast success. So like you see this with celebrities a lot, right? Or sports stars, right? They go from nothing to wildly famous, and that doesn't fit with their sense of their own identity. And because of that, they'll sabotage to try and bring their outer world into alignment with their inner world. And so the key is to do it the other way. Bring your inner world into alignment with your reality, because the reality is a good thing, right? We don't want to sabotage it. And so a lot of it's about redoing your identity. And so, you see this a lot with tech companies where, these young founders come in and they take off and they start doing really well and they don't know how to be that person. They're 24 years old and they're just like, right? So you see a lot of that. And then, later in life, when you're dealing with older entrepreneurs, and I can say that because I'm 55, we will often see things like blocked passions. We've given up so much for so long that we've lost our sense of passion about what we're doing and where we're going. We're just, phoning it in. We're filling the gap and, doing what we need to do. It's all undisciplined. None of it's fun anymore. And so the blocked passions is sort of a big one there. And that's when people start looking for ways to feel purposeful in their lives, because they're just cranking the money machine and they're not feeling fulfilled, right? So that shows up too. But there are a ton of different things that show up, and it just depends upon the person as to which one is the most prevalent for them.
Well, you mentioned that you have worked with, I forget how many hundreds of people through your career here. Can you give us some case studies of how clearing energy blocks have transformed the individual in order to transform the business? Um, so yeah, which of those hundreds of cases really stand out for you?
So I'm going to give you a couple of instances. One is going to be the transform the person to transform the business. I already told you one of those, which is the past life one, right? But this is another one where this this client was having a hard time getting himself to work. He was just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. He's just like, I know what I need to do. I have it all in place. I just can't get myself to do it. And I'm like, okay. So we sat and I did a little connection and I realized that his inner child was throwing a temper tantrum. He was overworking and not having enough play. And I said, okay, so what are you excited about right now? He said, like, I'm really excited about this new MacBook that came out and I really want it, but I can't justify the expense because my old one's fine. And I said, do you have the money? And he said, yeah. I said, you need to buy that. And he's like, really? And he was so excited, right? He like lit up and I'm like, yeah, buy it. And I said, because your inner child needs something that's just for him. That's something that's just, he's excited about it, right? And he's like, okay. And he bought the thing and it was on back order. So he was waiting for it to come in. But 2 days later, he's like, oh my God, I just did a month's worth of income in 2 days. And I'm like, yes, right. This is how it works. Now, a month later, he calls me and he says, I'm stuck again. I can't get myself to go again. What's going on? And I said, well, how's your new MacBook? And he said, oh, I canceled it. It was taking too long to get here. I said, you can't do that. It was your negotiation with your child inside. I'm like, you got to do that. And so I said, go order it again. And he did. And the next day he made a month's worth of sales. I'm like, okay, this is, part of it is negotiating with your inner child and making sure that you're giving yourself enough playtime, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an example there. I want to give you a different example though, because sometimes it's not about improving your business. Sometimes it's about avoiding potential problems, right? So I had a client, he was looking to do a consulting for equity deal with another business, and all he told me is, I'm moving my family to another state, and I'm going to join this business. And can you take a look at it for me before I commit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so he did not tell me it was family business, but I picked up on that when I was looking at it. I was like, this is family business, right? He's like, yeah. I said, one of the family members has been embezzling funds from this company for long enough that they are actually out of business and they don't even know it. They are bankrupt. And he's like, what? He's like, no, they didn't tell me that. I said, ask some more questions about the money and it will come out. And he did. He asked more questions about the money and they discovered that the uncle had embezzled something like $60,000 or $80,000 from the business, which was all of their operating capital. And they closed their doors within a month.
Oh, wow.
So if he had moved out there, it would have been a complete disaster for him and his family, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's stuff like that you want to look at, right? I had another client who was looking at a potential merger with another, he was a publishing company, he was looking at merging with another company. And he asked me to look at it and I was like, okay, I see this big behemoth of a building, like a massive skyscraper. And I see you as this little deflated balloon hanging out of a window on the side of the building. And he's like, yeah, I was afraid of that. Like, this is not a good merger for you. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then I said, well, but let me see what else is out there. And I started describing this person to him. And I was like, this is a younger guy. He's in his 30s. This is what he looks like. He's in Australia. And then my client was in the UK. And I'm like, yeah, he's in Australia. I'm like, I don't know. But, and he starts laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? He said, you're describing my son. He said, I've been thinking about partnering with him on a project. I said, that would be a really good project. Right. So that sort of thing is another thing to look at. And, you can look at the energetics of a new marketing initiative that you're going to do. You can look at the energetics of a new vendor you want to work with. There's all sorts of ways that you can take into account with your intuition how all of this stuff happens. If you're doing negotiations for a big deal, there are ways to look into the energy of the negotiations and see if there's hidden agendas that you can find. You can read the people in the room, things like that.
Well, if our viewers or listeners want to explore their business energetic alignments, tell us more about how it is that they can connect with you, and what are some of the tools that they can expect that you will help them to employ.
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is at my website at kellesparta.com. And if you want to email me, it's just Kelle at kellesparta.com. It's Kelle. There's nothing else, just E. And I also have a podcast called Spirit Sherpa. It is a foundational podcast that teaches you the foundations of energy, magic in the spirit world, along with personal growth and development. Okay, which I am a firm believer that you have to do both at the same time, because each one will limit the other if you don't. So the work that I do with people is I work with high-level entrepreneurs and executives, and I work with them at a personal one-on-one level. So I work on retainer, and so you can retain my services for 6 months or a year. And during that time, you work with me and we just develop a plan together on what you want. So some people want me to teach them how to do it. Some people just want to be able to say, hey, I've got this thing going on. Can you look at it for me? And, that's fine too. So I don't do any of the, you have to take this course and do this thing, because my clients don't have time for that. Right. So, I have those things if they want them, because I've done them in other areas, but that's not part of what I usually do with my high-end clients. I also do retreats in Panama, where I live, where people can come down and spend 3 to 5 days with me and really dive deep into their personal work, into their business, into everything that they want to talk about. And so we can do education on spiritual topics. We can do personal rituals. We can do energy healing work and sound healing work. I have so many things in my toolbox. So it's all custom designed for the people that I work with.
Well, you also touch on collective consciousness, which was, of course, where Jung focused all of his work. And you speak of the collective consciousness in conjunction with market trends. So how can the spiritually attuned business person leverage this collective consciousness and stay abreast of the trends in the economic and business world?
Yeah, so the trends are usually evident if you're looking at the world from a pattern finding perspective, right? And that's a lot of, as a shaman, I'm always pattern finding, right? The trends are evident, but figuring out how to fit yourself into the trends can be the challenge, right? And so what you can do on an energetic level is you can go into the astral, you can pull up what is known as the morphic field of the trend, and then you can test different things that you might do within the context of that and see how they do, right? So it's literally well, what about this or what about that, right? And you can test and see how they play out in the marketplace. And so it can help you to determine what is the path that is going to be most profitable. But you also want to look at things like what's going to be the most sane too, because the most profitable is not always the most sane, right? So you gotta balance how much sanity do you want to give up for the profit differential, right? Sometimes you're better off at a lower profit margin with a much higher sanity level. So you want to balance those when you're looking. So here's the thing about energy work is that the quality of the answer you get is directly proportional to the quality of the question you ask. So if you ask what's going to bring me the most profits, you're going to get an answer, but it may not be the optimal answer for your business. What if you instead say, what's going to be the best path for my business that gives me higher profits, higher quality of life, and an easier pathway, right? And then it can help you go in that direction. So there's also the factor of talking to your guides, right? Your guides are going to help you. If you're on track, they're going to be like, yep, here we go. We're going to go down this way. Or if you're off track, if you go so far off track, they're going to spiritually evict you from your location, right? And they're going to be like, nope, you are kicked out, right?
Yeah.
Because you're on the wrong path. So, but there is an art to working with your guides. Initially, almost everyone I work with initially is like, I don't want to listen to my guides. They're telling me to do things I don't want to do. And so, and I did that too for years. But when you can get to the place where you can surrender, not give up, surrender. Surrender means to let go in faith that it will work out, right? If you can learn to surrender to your guides and understand that they are your support staff and they're there to help you get where you want to go. But you also have to recognize that they're not your parents. The universe is not your parent, it's a partner. And if you treat it like a parent, you're going to be in a powerless situation and you're going to manifest more powerless stuff. So what you want is to be in a partnership relationship with the universe, and then your guides act in that partnership dynamic. And so all of that too. And speaking of partnerships, please don't get into a partnership with somebody in business until you've done an energetic check to see if you guys have a match, right? We know about values checks, and that's close, but it's not a full energetic check. And so, and then there's empath skills too. And I want to bring that into bear because a lot of my clients are empaths. They feel deeply what other people feel, and they can get overrun by other people's strong emotions. They can feel overwhelmed in a large crowd. They can have hard times breaking up with partners, whether that's business partners or personal partners, because they've mixed their energy with the partner and now they can't separate themselves. They have terrible boundaries, right? A lot of this is due to the way that they're holding their energy field. And so if you adjust that, then a lot of the other things take care of themselves. But then there's a whole process to eliminating the rest of it, right? So there's a lot of pieces and parts that I work with people on. It's a complex system. We are complex individuals. And the thing that I have done in my work is I have optimized the process because I've spent the last 25 years doing a deep dive on myself. Oh, more than that, but yeah, we won't talk about that. More than 25 years. But I've done that, and so I can optimize the path for my clients, and that's why, I've basically spent 28 years writing down everything that worked, doing the work for myself, and then writing down everything that worked. And so I can walk people through 25 years worth of personal growth work and about 10 to 12 years worth of energetic training in a 2.5 year process. Wow. So it's, if you want the express train, I'm your girl.
Well, fascinating. You were talking about questions. It took me back to my graduate studies, and one of my professors in particular was saying that the wisdom is in the question, not necessarily in the answer. And I think that's a powerful lesson to learn. It's a difficult lesson to learn, and questions are difficult to form, and getting answers you need rely upon asking the appropriate questions.
Well, in the energetic realm, if you're creating in the energetic realm, language is crucial. If you don't pick the right words, you're going to end up with all kinds of side effects, right? So it's so funny. Years ago, I gave one of my contracts to a friend of mine who's an attorney to ask him to review it. And he was like, "This is amazing." He said, "Do you want a job drafting contracts for me?" He said, "You've taken everything into consideration, every possibility of things that could go wrong you took into consideration." And I said, "No, I don't want that." I said, "But I have that because I've done magic for long enough." Because you got to do that with magic. You're like, you got to lawyer it sometimes,
Right.
Sometimes it's. And then you got to know when you got to do the big picture versus when you do the smaller picture for the energetic work. Because sometimes you just say, "I want to be happy," and that will bring you happiness, but it may bring you happiness in a way you didn't anticipate, right? So sometimes you want to put parameters.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you some things on the very macro level? You were talking about patterns since World War II, one of the patterns is that the United States has well, even before World War II, but since World War II has sought to develop uh, a singular hegemony where the U.S. rules the world, and the rule-based order that they talk about all the time is essentially my way or the highway. And so many, many devious and horrible, horrible things have happened over the last 40, 50 years uh, because of that desire of U.S. leadership. That doesn't reflect, I don't think, the population of the people in the United States. I think people over the world are wonderful people, and the United States are part of that world who are wonderful people. We have terrible leaders,
Yes.
maniacal, terrible leaders, and they have done and committed horrible, horrible crimes. The pattern is that pattern is being broken. BRICS have formed, and over the majority of the population are associated with BRICS countries now. The gross national product of these nations is now outpacing that of the Western countries aligned with the United States. So patterns are changing and breaking. And you just mentioned you live in Panama, which is a vassal of the United States, but I guess Donald Trump is going to even take more control over that. At least that, but then there are other patterns emerging. Panama is going to lose its preeminence as the only way from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Mexico is building a train and canal way, and I think there's other Central American countries who are doing the same thing. So the importance of the Panama Canal is going to become diminished from what it currently is today, and that's just in the next few years here. What's happening with all those patterns, and where do we as business people in the United States, what are the best moves for us?
So I feel like the canal issue and the hegemony issue are different, right? So as I look at this, what we're looking at is the breakdown of, in the spiritual world, they would call it patriarchy, right? And it's the breakdown. So when you're in the masculine and not the feminine, when you are not balanced, you will go into domination. Okay, that is the shadow side of the masculine, because it's not being balanced with the feminine heart energy and things like that. And when the feminine is not balanced by the masculine, you go into stillness and lack of movement, right? And so, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, we're breaking down the patriarchy. We got to get into the feminine." It's like, no, got to get into balance, right? And this is the knee-jerk reaction is to go into the opposite. And so, what's happening right now and what we're going to see happening. And I think, I can't remember the name of the book, the fourth stage or the fourth something. Anyway, there's a book from 1999, I think, that lays this out. But we are going into a period of great upheaval. We're already in it, but it's going to continue for the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. I did shortly after the election, I had a retreat here with a group, and we did a spiritual canoe. And that's where you get together into a spirit journey, a guided shamanic journey, and you go into the canoe and everybody sees what they see. They go looking for what is the future, right? And so we did what is the future of the U.S. in the coming year. And what it said was there will be massive upheaval, massive chaos and breakdown and all sorts of stuff, followed by, and what I got was 1,000 years of peace. And, everybody else saw some variation on a theme, right? So, you need to be prepared to take advantage of the chaos, right? As a business owner, we think, oh, we want stability, but chaos is the times when the most profits are made, right? If you are positioned to take advantage of them. right? So, pay attention to what's happening in your industry and see how and there's going to be disruption. So these are the best times to make massive changes in your industry, right? Because we are not stuck in the pattern of sameness because we're already breaking down everything around it. So if you are thinking, oh, it would be so great if my industry could go here, but it's such a staid and stodgy industry, this is the time to do the thing because we're already in breakdown. And once you're in breakdown, it is so much easier to make change than it is if you start from a stable place. So any massive sea change that you want to make in your industry, this is the time to do that. If you are in an industry that is typically stable, you need to expect that it's going to be fluctuating, which means you need more cash reserves. It means you're going to need to take advantage of the times because you're going to have feast and famine because of the disruption, right? So you need to make sure that you're prepared for the feast so you don't lose out on it. If you don't want your website going down, you don't want your supply chain going south, you don't, all of these things that could be impacted by a feast cycle. And you need to have the reserves in place for the famine cycle. And that means don't lay your people off because if you do, you will be unprepared for the feast cycle again, right? That's another way in which, we're like, oh, got to look for the shareholders. You have to be the leader and you have to say, look, we're in a feast and famine cycle. The balance sheet is going to look a little low for the next couple of quarters, but we're going to need these people in a couple of quarters and we can't afford to lose them to everybody else and then be caught flat-footed and not get the feast cycle. In the long run, this is the better call. And you need to be willing as a leader to stand up and say that and sell it to your shareholders, right? So these are the sorts of things that you look for on the energetic side of things. And then it's a matter of testing the energetics and saying, okay, how about this and how about that and how about that? But expect that your shareholders are also going to be in fear cycles. And so you as a leader, you have to learn how to manage people in fear. You have to learn how to walk them through being in fear and get them back into their place of power. When we are in our power, we make good decisions. When we are in fear, it's actually, you probably know this study, but there's been studies done where they discovered that when people are afraid, they lose 10 points of IQ. Okay, so you need to pull people out of fear in your process, and that includes you, right, as a leader. So all of these things go into the mix. And this is why we need to look at the bigger picture and look at the energetics at the same time. So part of the skill set is learning how to manage your team and your shareholders and everybody else that you're interacting with and keeping them out of fear.
Yeah. Well, wonderful talking with you, Kelle. And viewers and listeners, Kelle's new book is coming out, and she is going to provide for you an executive summary of the book, The Spiritual CEO, Unlock Energetic Alignment for 6, 7, and 8-figure success. And this outlines the spiritual journey that we can all take. And you can find the link to this in our show notes. Thank you, Kelle, for being with us. It's been a pleasure having you, and viewers and listeners, thank you so much for being with us. Always an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. I hope you will take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And if you would, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review. These reviews and ratings make a huge difference for us, so we would appreciate your contribution to that. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Thank you for tuning into Streams to Impact, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital, a company empowering passionate professionals like you to develop multiple streams of passive income built on solid passive real estate investments. As a significant part of our endeavors to make a cosmic and meaningful impact for this world, Steed Talker Capital contributes significant portions of our profits to activities and organizations committed to better understanding the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. If you are ready to learn how our passive investors have earned an average 33% annual return on their investments, schedule your complimentary passive income to Prideful Impact consultation. Obviously, we cannot continue indefinitely to offer these valuable consultations for free, so grab your passive income to Prideful Impact consultation while you still can. Go to steedtalker.com/passive